Happy Thursday.
Hey folks, good morning.
So that went from no agenda to a bunch of items really quick. Guess I'll throw mine in there first and then, because it's just a quick little actionable item there. And then I'll let others take over with theirs. Screen share set up 1 second. Mine was pretty quick. A plus dev syntax, we've already approved it in runtime and image spec. So just need one more approval over here for doing it over in distribution spec. And that is all I had to add. We've already merged the other two, so if you're just getting another distribution spec person over here to hit approve, and we'll get that knocked out. That's pretty much it for me today. Aaron, I guess you had the quick actionable item there, 1066. You want to take it?
Yeah, this is a pretty small one. This adds the artifact type field to image index so that if set if you have an index that references multiple manifests and you want that to be sort of like an artifact, not necessarily a collection of index, or rather a collection of images, but a collection of artifacts. You can have some sort of descriptor for that and have it associated with a a little bit frazzled this morning, via the refers API.
Is line 28 right?
Oh, no, it is not. That needs to be removed, yeah.
I think one of the things we had talked about looking at this earlier, and I see John jumping off on the mic as well, so maybe he's got some more context in there. I'd love to see some more examples of people that need this or using this somewhere out in the field.
I can speak for myself in that we intend to use this at my company. We have plugins that are published for a variety of platforms, and it makes sense to use image index as opposed to an image with the number of layers for each of those plugins, because image index gives us the ability to associate each manifest with a platform, and then each manifest actually needs to be signed independently, right? So we'll have to have SigStore or notary certificates for the Mac OS, AMD 64, Mac OS, Apple Silicon, so on. Each one of those is going to be its own artifact. And then the image index is going to be the top level item.
Cool. Yeah, just kind of throwing that into the conversation. I think that would go a long way for getting this moving forward.
Certainly.
Anyone else? I feel like this one is less contentious than the subject because the subject adds multiple weird things that has other implications in there. I think it's a little easier to assume that someone's going to have an index that's got some kind of complex artifact. Cool. So who do we have next on the agenda? Is this you again, Aaron, on this one?
Yeah, this is just picking up the conversation last week. I think there was discussion about moving this language to the distribution spec, but there's still, I think, your comment regarding, are registry operators going to be supportive of a standard that says that you should use deny lists and not allow lists, so that things like community artifacts like WASM, or again going back to like SBOMs and things like that, that those tools can sort of be confident that they can use OCI 1.1 as a spec to build upon. But I think before I make a PR to distribution spec, I think we need to unblock this comment from you, because the comment's going to apply regardless of which repository the PR is opened against.
Yeah, I just know we've made changes before to push in certain directions and didn't have feedback until the last minute. And then they said, oh no, you cut an RC and now we don't like what you add in the RC. This one I feel like is going to go even farther than that. I don't think we'll hear a complaint until a while later, and registries say we just don't support OCI at that point.
Right. I guess I think the analogy I think of here is, if OCI 1.0, or even like going back to the Docker manifest specification, it had a field like what the base image is, and that base image, by default, the spec said that you had to support, say, Slackware. I'll use an older distribution as the reference. If you had to use Slackware as your base image, and it wasn't sort of necessary to support other base images, Ubuntu, Red Hat, etc., that'd be a pretty significant obstacle to the growth of images, right? As a means of, or OC, or rather Docker as a means of distributing container images. If OCI is going to support artifacts, the specification as it's written doesn't actually require that artifacts be supported, which I think is kind of the fundamental obstacle, and I've raised it numerous times. I don't know how to get past this impasse, except say that there is a ecosystem that wants to use OCI as a means of distributing artifacts for supply chain security, for package managers, for other uses. But there's not a standard that actually says that they have something they can use, right? Knowing that a registry is OCI 1.1 compliant doesn't actually mean anything to me as a consumer or user of the specification.
Yeah, as someone that's written other tooling for this and come across so many things that just they are not even OCI 1.1, but there are major registries out there. It's not easy writing stuff on the client side that is going to work everywhere. You kind of take a best effort for a lot of this stuff.
Isn't that the purpose of specification?
In a way, I think the challenge for us is to make sure that we don't go so far to the edge of saying thou shalt do all these things that there isn't any registry that's OCI 1.1 conformant. And therefore, what does the value of 1.1 become at that point?
I suppose the question then is, do we have a strong belief that there are registries that are so firmly opposed to this that this is an unactionable item? I don't get the impression that's actually the case. And my understanding is we've got maybe some older notes from one registry that indicates that they are not interested in supporting artifacts, in which case they might not be interested in OCI 1.1 at all. So to me, I think as a specification, what value does this provide to me as an implementer if I can't know that my artifacts are supported?
So I would say that today, if you were to push to an OCI 1.1 registry and you're going, shucks, I hate to use their example because they're not here, but I can't even push a Docker image to the Zot registry. They don't support the Docker media types. It's not in our spec. We don't say they have to.
Mm-hmm.
They are implementing a spec in every other way out there. And I've just seen a lot of registries that did some kind of approval list rather than a deny list. But I'm talking too much and I see John has his hand up.
I'm looking at 1030 and I don't see a huge problem with it. I have a question about the image index media type diff. So yeah, this one. I have personal opinions about this, but other people have counter opinions about this. The manifest document, the image index document has a list of manifests descriptors, and you would sure think that only manifests would go in there, right? But other clients have pushed non-manifest things. And as written, the current specification, more or less, everyone has hard-coded a set of manifests that they know how to parse and do stuff with. This line, I think, is the only place where you might annoy or break things, where registry operators assume that things in this manifests array point to manifests that they know about and have parsed and are able to interpret. I don't really have strong opinions about it. I think it's fine. Like, I would just ignore it, as the specification already says. But you might encounter other registry or client implementations who would fall over if you started pushing an image index that pointed to like an arbitrary thing. My only comment.
Yeah, that's actually in the line in question. The media type field here is not the manifest media type, right? It's the
right.
Yeah.
It's the children, right?
Yeah.
And I would not be surprised if that would frustrate some implementations to have like
that makes
non-expected manifests.
Yeah, I'm going to. It's interesting. I see what you mean. because this is this is actually referring to manifest media types as opposed to content media types. And the change here on line 45 was just mechanical, finding places where ignored was ambiguous. But actually, you raise an interesting point here, is that I don't even know if OCI 1.0 registries are adhering to line 45 as it's written up today.
I think not, mostly.
So I think maybe that line should be removed.
Is this another?
So in particular, like I think build kit caching was using an image manifest or an image index and like pointing to blobs from within this list of manifests, and that broke some stuff. But like a lot of registries did support it, and we're just ignoring it. But then like obviously like clients would be confused if you tried to actually pull this thing. And I think for a lot of reasons they stopped using the image index and moved to an image manifest. I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion here. That one requires some thinking on my behalf, and maybe someone has a better idea for like, manifests are more strongly typed than blobs because we have to parse them a lot. Because the manifests field has the word manifest in it, is it a hard requirement that these only point to manifests? And also, is it a hard requirement that those manifests are things that we specify? Or like, should we leave this open-ended so that we can evolve the spec to have like a new type of manifest, and some implementation reading this would just ignore it or not generate an error when encountering, manifest v2 or whatever. And again, I don't have answers. I'm just pointing this out for discussion.
I know when we looked at it before, the line 27 was saying, hey, this is a list of manifest, not blobs. That was kind of one of the things we hinged on. It also makes me wonder if this is another one of those cases where this phrasing, not generating error, might be different for clients reading it versus registry servers validating it. So it might be something to revisit how it looks in both scenarios.
And from the last time we had this conversation, I think we have new people involved. I'll point out that the spec itself is inconsistent here a little bit. The fact that we link to manifest.md from this description of the manifests field isn't like normative, right? Like it doesn't have to link to this thing. And also, if you look at the image layout.md file and scroll all the way down to the index example, at the very bottom, this is an example of an image index. And one of the things it points to is application/XML, which is not one of the two defined manifest types in image spec. So by my reading, this proves that the language and under the manifest field is non-normative around like what can be in this list. It doesn't have to be just image index or image manifest. But I don't know how we want to solve that discrepancy.
I don't have a great answer right now. The other one that I was looking at that caught my attention was line 34 on the manifest, which was knowing that some manifest, they can't generate an error if artifact type is unknown. And the concern I have on that one is just knowing that some registries want to typically like to implement allow list rather than deny list. So once you say you're not allowed to implement a allow list, that could make a registry uncomfortable. That could result in them saying they don't support this.
I'd be kind of shocked by that because it's like it's a string, you know, like the actual code that handles all of this stuff doesn't have to behave any differently, right? So there's no real burden on a registry to just not reject certain string values because the string value doesn't actually influence what a registry's obligations are to the specification or its clients. And so I would just be really surprised if someone actually pushed back on that.
From the spec side, I agree. I'm thinking from the security side of a registry saying, hey, we don't want unknown stuff in our server.
Well, I mean, that's a terrible argument. Not from you, you know, that it's a silly line of thought because I can change that string to be something you do accept.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change anything from your perspective. And it's maybe worse from a security perspective to masquerade as some other thing, right? So yeah, I would push back on that if someone complains about this.
I can't think of anybody has ever done something like that. I said facetiously.
Clients wouldn't just lie.
No.
Yeah.
Trust me, it's an image.
I think that's largely what we've agreed upon with artifacts anyhow. So trust me, it's an image is now the norm.
I would push back a little bit on people saying this needs to go in distribution spec. I don't know how to cleanly put this over in distribution spec. I feel like all the wording, all the fields we're setting this on are already over in image specs. So for those saying that it needs to get moved over, how would we move it over? And I'm going to take silence as Aaron, keep it over here for now until someone says otherwise.
Okay. John, did you feel really strongly about me changing that line in the image index markdown file, or should I guess
I don't personally care. Care is probably not the wrong word. I don't have the opinion personally. I just imagine it being problematic maybe down the road. And if it is at all possible that this is less contentious to revert that one line, then I might do that. But also, like, they're functionally equivalent, like, you know, be ignored and not generate an error. So I'm fine with the diff. I wanted awareness around this potential stumbling block down the line.
yeah.
So John, I have another take on that, which is that we do have a digest in here, right? That it's a whole descriptor. There's a digest field in here somewhere, or there should be. We're going to have a manifest. It's going to be in a list here. We got the digest. A registry server could still validate that digest points to a manifest if they wanted to.
Yeah, they could block the push of the manifest being referred to because it has that manifest media type is not supported. So,
I could see that being a problem because a lot of registries store manifests and blobs in separate like digest namespaces. And so if they're just checking like, does this digest exist in my manifest store? And it doesn't, then they would fail. So like if we want that not to happen, then we maybe need even more language or slightly different language around like, oh, you know, this isn't stored as a manifest in the backend. we need to skip it or not generate an error or whatever.
Oh, I was going another direction. I was going with allowing registries to reject this if they're doing validation on their side and the thing you refer to is not a manifest. And so we're not rejecting it because the media type is wrong. So the media type enforcement can still say, hey, you can't generate an error because the media type is wrong. But they could generate an error if the thing you point to doesn't exist in their manifest namespace.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think that's bad in terms of flexibility of like using this specification. It's unfortunate if the registry would reject it just because of like assumptions around how the subject of this descriptor was uploaded. But also, like, maybe we want to make it very explicit that manifests can only point to things that were uploaded as a manifest to the registry in the context of a registry. I don't know that that's the case, but a lot of people have assumptions around that.
For me, making clients, it's very nice to know that every entry in here can be hit from the manifest API, and I don't have to do two guesses. Is this a manifest? Is it a blob? And try to figure out how to pull it. It's nice to know that everything in this list is a manifest. I can hit it from that API. Okay, so John's got to step away for a second there. Aaron, that might be the out both of us are looking for, which, if I'm thinking about the same way, allows us to say, hey, we're not going to generate an error because of this, so we can leave this line as is. And registries that are doing something funny or doing something sensible can do it for different reasons.
Yeah, I'm thinking that if you start pushing arbitrary manifests, you're going to encounter errors well before you get to the point of pushing the image index.
Well, what they're doing is they're pushing blobs and listing the blobs in this index.
Yeah.
And that's,
well, that's out of spec. So
you would think so. And kind of, yeah, sort of. But people have debated this for a long while.
Yeah.
And I would probably be on your side on this one. All right. John may be convincing me to not be so picky on line 34. So my objection there might be slightly going away. I still think it would be good to get someone from a registry to chime in on this one, someone from a major registry. So ECR, ACR, GCR, or GAR now, whoever's taking over that one. Someone over there just to look this over and say, yeah, from the registry operator side, or Docker Hub as well, from the registry operator side, none of this raises any red flags for us that we've seen out there. That would be helpful for me, knowing that we're changing this for both sides, the client and the server.
Hi, I'm back. I don't think pointing to blobs from an image index is out of spec. I don't know, I don't have opinions about that, but in terms of like a straight reading of the specification, I don't think it's forbidden. So like, do we care about that? Should we forbid it, or is it fine? I don't know. I think it's neat.
For the manifests array to have a content descriptor that points at a blob. How do you know that it's a blob and not a manifest, so that you know which API to use to fetch it?
Well, the thing about image spec is that it doesn't know anything about any kind of API, right? The only reason it's a problem is that the registry API was kind of a mistake in that it separated manifests and blobs into two separate namespaces. And if that weren't the case, then like everything could be a blob,
It's true.
and this wouldn't be a problem. But
yeah, there it is, the load bearing but.
like as a client, you need to know which one, and like falling back is silly. And also some registries, if you ask to pull a manifest by digest and you change the digest to a very large blob, they will crash, right? Because they don't separate their blobs and manifests into separate namespaces. And so you can fetch a manifest or a blob through the manifests or blobs handlers. Is that good? I don't know. Who knows? We don't really make it explicit whether that's okay or not. And a lot of registries don't care if you reference like blobs from a manifest, or like you could even key off of the media type to know like, oh, this must not refer to a manifest, because if it had this media type, I would have rejected it, So registries could know which handler it was uploaded through, but not clients. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but it is ambiguous. And if someone has a strong opinion either way, we should change the specification. But as is, this is not forbidden. And per one of our examples in the specification, it seems like it should be allowed, not capital should, just lowercase should.
I have a strong opinion that an array of manifests should all be pointers to manifest.
I will say I just did a Control F for blob and found that online the line number might actually be just off because I'm looking at my other PR, but around line 70 on os.version, it says the reference blob. That's probably an error. Probably say the referenced manifest or referenced image, because this is a descriptor to.
Yeah, that was a typo.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, more evidence that I'm right.
On the other hand, it does say
Fight you.
it is a list of manifests. So
right, but that doesn't.
Say
That's
what
not
type-
normative.
It explicitly says that it must at least support OCI image manifests, but it can also support other types, and it must be ignored if it's not a type you understand, right?
Yeah.
And the spec doesn't say this required property contains a list of manifests which must be like manifests. It just says it does contain that property, and they are this. But there's no normative language that like does legal jargon around like this is allowed or not allowed. So linking to a markdown file does not convey a requirement in the specification.
It's also the wrong markdown file to link to in general, because there's more than one manifest listed in our spec.
Yeah, and manifests aren't an abstraction in the image spec, really. We don't have a notion of something that is either an image index or an image manifest. And so if we did, it'd be easier to spec this. But as is, it is just like, oh, that string is the same string as the string in distribution spec. Therefore, I'm going to make this wild jump that those are the same. And
let's be specific. It says manifests in this case are an array of objects, which was the base type, not specific image indexes. No, manifests. It literally then follows. It could be an image index manifest or an image manifest. Nesting, right?
If I may, while as an implementer, it excites me that I might be able to put blobs in an image index. That is not the purpose of or artifacts. this is not the purpose of this PR, and so I would ask that if we're gonna have because in this case the purpose of this PR is artifacts and image manifests, not anything to do with this manifest field on image index. So this is just a sort of cleanup of the ignore line that we're looking at. So maybe we could have a separate discussion for the PR and for the metaphysics of manifests and blobs.
We can qualify what's meant for ignored there, but
yeah,
the other question, as you said, is on the distribution API. The expectation, of course, being that if I request the manifest listed or the object, I'll be able to pull it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you say must not generate an error, what does that really? I'm not seeing it. Ignored means store, at least, right? Or at least that's this context of ignored before in other similar contexts.
I think we've got wording inside the distribution spec on how registries could do some validation there. So that makes sense to throw on that side if we need to do it.
We do it there. Yeah.
All right. Dead horse been beaten enough. Any other comments on this one?
That's what I would appreciate your PR reviews, please.
Okay, after 10:30. Toddy wants to talk about garbage collection. Toddy, the floor is yours.
Oh, thanks. I just kind of was looking for clarification. Couple of things that we discovered. First, I'm not sure how much we cover in the distribution spec for garbage collection, and some of my colleagues mentioned that there is not a lot. But the scenario specifically right now is coming back to the index manifest, right? Or manifest index. When we do referrers and we use the manifest index, right? Every time when you add a new referrer, the manifest index gets updated. And a lot of registries, they don't delete the old one. Now you have multiple manifest index that may be staying there, and what is kind of the guidance for cleaning those ones. The other thing that we were looking at is when you delete, let's say, something from the registry. I'm trying to remember what was the scenario because it was 2 weeks ago. But when you delete, most of the clients, they just delete the manifest and they leave the blobs hanging around, right? And the expectation is that the blobs will be cleaned up by the registry, but there is no requirement that this will be done by the registry.
Correct.
And yeah, now we come to customers, especially in our space, where they say, wow, you're charging me for much more than I expect you to charge me. So those are kind of the two scenarios that I think we discovered, and there was no clarity how to handle it because we were discussing whether we should add into auras like go delete also the garbage in the client, or should we have something in the specification to say clients are not responsible for that. Every registry should clean up after them, or orphaned artifacts. And the question is like for the manifest index, well, is that orphan or is it just another manifest index, right? Especially when it is used for the referrers.
So as another client writer, my take on this one is I don't delete the blobs because I don't know where else the blobs may be used. And so someone could upload some content, say it references this image. That same content could reference another image, could be uploaded in a different way that I didn't see that it was uploaded, just in a different manifest, some different annotations on the manifest, however they upload it. And I don't want to break all those other manifests out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I typically leave blob deletion up to the registry server because of that.
but nowhere we specify that the registry will be deleting those, right?
Yeah, we
that-
explicitly did not specify it because there was too many differences of opinion on the implementation details.
It was always left up to implementations
Okay.
to define it themselves.
Is there at least recommendation that we can add, or to say a registry should take care of orphan
I feel like this is a good
blobs?
opportunity for a working group.
Okay,
And I'm not
what about
volunteering
the
to
other
run it.
one?
And it's definitely tied to namespaces as well, this one. So it's a bit of an issue.
Yeah, and that was kind of my impression of why we are not specifying it, but like now, as I said, so we discovered in different registry behaves different, right? And you never know even whether the blob will disappear, right? So
So
a working group, okay.
If you want to add garbage collection to the spec, I feel like that would be a good working group thing to get a lot of registry operators all in one room to say, let's define how we're all doing garbage collection in a way that is interoperable between all of us, that we don't define something that one person can't do.
What I like to see on that is a policy, recommendation that we could request on this particular object we're pushing, that you keep it with this particular policy. But again, that would probably be need to be within namespace.
Makes sense.
So I still have my hand up for another one of your comments earlier, which was you were talking about refers and garbage collection refers. On my own personal to-do has been to implement something that would allow you to easily look that an image has been deleted. Let me go find the refers type of points to something that no longer has an image manifest out there and start cleaning those up as well. And so some kind of client-side garbage collection of a repo that would go out and find all those different refers tags out there and say, hey, these things are referring to things don't exist. Let me clean them up.
That is actually a third scenario that you are explaining. I'm more looking at like, let's say, I have an image, right? And I attach a SPDX SBOM, right? And that uses the manifest index because 10, right? Then I want to attach Cyclone-DX. So I need to go to update the manifest index, but the update means I need to create a new one, and theoretically I should delete the old one. But like I was talking with Jesse the other day, and he said, we don't delete the old ones. So you normally, and Docker does the same thing. So you get an error and Docker Hub, you get an error that says, yeah, we created the first one, but we couldn't delete, created the new one, but we couldn't delete the old one. So the old one stays, right? And if I can, like, the first thing that comes to mind is if I can go and actually tag the old one, I can rewrite the new one and remove the reference to the Cyclone-DX. That is one thing, but so it's not removing the blobs this time, but it's just removing this index that points to outdated information.
Yeah. That one has always been less of a concern to me just because of the sizes we're talking about. We're probably talking about a couple 100 bytes.
Well, I don't think it's only the size that kind of worries me. So size is one thing, but I can write a script to constantly say, okay, go and retag constantly this index and don't allow anybody to add anything new.
So Sajay, where would you be attaching that other content in there? Because what I'm thinking of is you update the refers index, you're going to add a new entry to there. The new refers manifest is going to have all the refers that you had before plus another thing. And so you wouldn't get rid of any of the other artifacts themselves. You're just going to clean up that index that had one less entry in it.
Right. This is also with how registries don't delete any manifests, right? There's no guidance around retagging latest and keeping that around. So I think the general problem is we don't define anything to do with garbage collection, and it becomes hard to describe to customers what should they do with these old manifests. And I mean, we want to keep them around for making sure digest pools don't fail.
We do have content management in the distribution spec, but it's a may implement for each of the features, including tags. There's no absolute requirement that you implement that.
Right. And I'm actually ambivalent about GC in this space because I feel it is very specific to how you implement it.
Yeah.
But an API to indicate whether you want to delete stuff, cascading deletes might be more maybe something we can think about, so that, hey, I'm deleting the root manifest, just clean up all the garbage, don't keep around these other reference tags and whatnot, right? So that might be helpful because it's implicitly done for blobs, but it's not done for referrers right now.
And the other thing that may be helpful is having a way to discover those kind of random artifacts. Right now, we cannot list all the untagged, for example, images. And the same is true for all these untagged index manifests, right? So if having an API that actually allows me to discover all these things, then we may work out and say, okay, either the client can do it, or at the minimum, there is some visibility. But now those actually remain kind of hidden in the registries.
Which brings up namespaces again in search and index. Yeah.
To me, it brings up wanting to improve the tag listing API and to be able to return back the tags, the manifest that they, the descriptor the tag points to. If a registry is maintaining a list or something, if we're returning the untagged manifest, all that should be in that tag listing with some kind of nice format.
The distribution has a nice sample implementation of tag history. Like you look at a tag and you know what are the digest it was referring to and things like that. I don't know whether anybody's actually considered making that a standard where history of the tag can be exposed because it's hard for customers to keep this data right over time.
I'm listening to a whole bunch of APIs that are actually in the Docker Hub API. And others. It would be nice if we had a standardized namespace API.
We're already planning a 1.2 release and we're still trying to get 1.1 out.
I know. Wait a minute. Artifacts is 1.2. Artifact manifest, sorry. That was the promise, right? On 999. Just keeping track.
So Brandon, should I just file an issue and say, do we need a working group for garbage collection and working group for improving the APIs, or what steps?
I think it's content management.
Content management, okay.
For creating a working group, that is a PR over on the TOB repo. So that would be the process to start that. And don't ask me how that process completes because I'm still waiting on that.
There is another working group, I think, in the working about the authentication, which is another interesting problem to deal with.
That was where my comment was going. I was like, everybody keeps asking me when that's going to finish up. I'm like, I don't know. Finish this whenever the TOB says it's ready.
Okay. Okay, I'll look at the issues. I'll file something just for kind of keeping a record on that. Thanks.
That's a cool idea.
It'll be good to get some registry operators all together on something like that. So,
yep.
Cool. Well, we started with absolutely no agenda before we started this meeting. And we went for 50 minutes. That's darn impressive. Does anybody have anything else they want to use the last 10 minutes for? Other than a coffee break?
Just want to say I updated the PR, Brandon.
Thanks.
The plus dev one is ready to merge.
Nice. Productivity in a meeting. What a strange thing. On that note, I want to end on a high note. So let's go ahead and give everybody back a few minutes of their day. And enjoy the rest of your week. Happy Tau Day to everybody.
Thanks, Brandon. See you, folks.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everyone.